Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Pianist Academy. I'm Charles Szczepanek. We have a bunch of people here already this morning, so good to see you all. It's 10 o'clock. I'm in Colorado. We're in a very different place than usual today. You'll probably notice that if you've tuned into live streams before, but if you've been on the streams before, you know that my piano is undergoing some major construction. So we are in my studio. And we're going to be here for a couple weeks, probably. So we've got Tiago in the house. Hey, Tiago, good to see you. And Skullbone. Skullbone's here. I haven't seen you before. So welcome, Skullbone. Welcome, Antonio. And Sir Woolsley is here as well. Sir Woolsley, welcome. All right. So everything's a little bit different. So bear with me as it should go just fine this morning, I think. Bedlington Grimmer. Hey. Hey, good to see you. Awesome. So, I had a video submission from Sir Woolsley come in, and so I want to start off the stream with that, and then we're going to jump into everybody's questions that you might have. Sir Woolsley has faithfully, and I congratulate you on this, Sir Woolsley, you have faithfully taken me up on sending in videos and getting comments back. So, for all of you, especially if you're new here and you haven't done this before, you haven't seen this before, you are free to submit a video of you playing. Any level is absolutely fine, from beginner all the way through to anything. And there are directions on how to do that in the description below, and I'm happy to review it live for you to learn and for everybody to learn from. And yeah, so you just basically send me an email and link me a video file, and then we can post it on here. So without further ado, we're going to jump into what Sir Woolsley sent over. And I will give you maybe a little bit more of an update on what's going on with the piano if we have time later on today. So let me just get this queued up for us. That should be pretty good, I think. Okay. So yes, Bedlington Grimmer says, I didn't know we could submit videos. Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's always a link below, and usually we always start off streams with, if there's a video submission, we start them off with that. So feel free. Anything. We've had Sir Woolsley playing Chopin before. Gosh, we've heard many Chopin things. We've heard some Satie. Yeah. So anything's welcome. So today, Sir Woolsley is playing Brahms. I think it's your first time playing Brahms, isn't it, Sir Woolsley? Let me know in the comments, or in the chat, I should say. And yeah, if you haven't said hi already, drop hi in the chat and let me know where you're tuning in from. All right, let's hear Sir Woolsley. He's playing Brahms Intermezzo, Opus 117, number 1, just, I think, the first page or so, the A section of it. So, yeah, let's take a listen. Here we go. Awesome. Congrats, Sir Woolsley. Really great stuff. Let's give Sir Woolsley a round of applause for that. You have come such a long way in about a year, Sir Woolsley. So really nice. Nice work. Brahms, gosh. Let me first just touch on two things in the chat, and then we're gonna talk about this Brahms. So Skullbone, I'm gonna come back to that question as soon as we finish up talking about Sir Woolsley's playing. And Scott, hello Scott. I wanted to be sure, Scott, that you saw the video I did on interpretation a couple weeks ago, because I know you're always asking about stuff like that. So be sure, if you haven't seen it, be sure and check it out on the channels from a couple, probably 2 weeks ago or so. Okay. So Sir Woolsley sent in this piece, and he had a couple questions in the email. And one of the things that we've talked about on live streams before is just how widely spread Brahms is, and how it really requires the hand. We don't get it can injure people. That's really what I've said before, and so just to be careful. So I've got the music pulled up. Let's take a quick look at that. So this is the beginning of this piece. It looks like there's a lot of notes, but it's andante. So it's not too horrible, right? The biggest struggle, Sir Woolsley, is, and you're doing a pretty good job at this so far. The thing that really injures people in Brahms, and the thing to really watch out for, is that the hand never gets a chance to come back together. So it's always open, and it never gets to relax. And that is totally evident right at the beginning, first bar, right hand. We have these octaves to hold. So no matter what we do, the hand is stuck in this position, and sometimes wider. Sometimes, for example, if we need to play 2 on a 7th, so I've got this angle today, woohoo. So if we need to play 2 on a 7th, like here, that feels like a big stretch. Or if we play thumb there and cross to 2, that's also a very big stretch. Later on, we have, let's see, similar stuff. End of this line, we have this crescendo. We're going to come back to that in a little bit. Whoops, natural. And then this massive thing, right? That's, we'll call that a 10th, even though it's not. It's darn close. It feels like it. So very rarely do we have opportunities to let the hand come back together. Scott says for Brahms' piano, he had to have quite a reach. I think I don't know the size of his hands, but he probably did. And he probably did. We'll leave it there for now. So, Sir Woolsley, you asked me if I would teach this piece early on for students. And my quick answer would be probably not. To me, this piece is really a study in voicing and bringing out inner voices. So it's relatively easy if we're going to bring out the top note, but in this case, it's not that. It's the same note. The voice we need to bring out is all in the middle. And so the piece is really a wonderful thing to work on. How do we bring out all of the other different fingers in the right hand especially, so that we hear where the melody's going, and so that we don't get kind of knocked away by the bell-like figure. Sir Woolsley says, not really. The question is if you would teach this piece using finger legato. So that also depends, because if it's your first piece trying to play finger legato, if you have, and more than that, if it's the first time you've had to do finger substitutions, where we have a finger on a note and we need to change to other fingers while we hold that pitch down. Yes, you're calling that finger replacement, finger substitution, same thing. That is common in a lot of music, but if this is your first time having to do it, this is an incredibly challenging piece to do it in. I would always start people off with a different piece of music to work on this, because this presents so many challenges to play well. We have to bring out the inner line. We have to finger substitute. Yes, we do need to use finger legato and finger substitution, because if we're not going to blur the whole thing with pedal, for example, all of this, That's getting way too blurry. That doesn't sound like Brahms anymore. Right? And so if we're going to be able to change the pedal like that, we have to have the fingers sustaining on the keys. Let me play a little bit of it for you, Sir Woolsley. You'll see that I'll change to the top-down view. And you said you still find Bach two-part inventions. Do you mean that this is harder than the Bach, or is the Bach harder than this? All right, so you'll see. I'll play a few lines of this, the opening page for you, and I think you'll see all the finger substitutions I do. I'll try to play as finger legato as possible. So there's the opening statement, right? So there was a lot of stuff that I was changing fingers around in. So that is totally good. Maybe if you haven't already, mark in your score and have a better idea of exactly what finger you're going to substitute for what finger here and there. There are a couple different right choices. And you said you're studying with a teacher locally. They will hopefully have some good suggestions for you that, and you said you're using, I'm using almost the same fingering as you are. That's good. You know, for example, in the third bar here, I'll just put that back on the screen. In the third bar, second full bar, we've got this going on. That doesn't look like a hard thing. The F, or the lower voice, F to E flat to G. And there are a couple different ways to play that bar in particular. So let me show you a couple of those. So if we switch back to top down, you can start with having the thumb on it and cross to 2, but that's really hard. And then thumb. You have to have massive hands to do that. Another option would be, let's see. You have to start with probably 3 or 2. You could start with the second finger in the bar previous and slide like this for that lower part. Or start with 3 and play 3, 2, 1. There's no way for us to play from 2 on G and play anything other than thumb down here. So the other option, instead of crossing over with 2, which is that horrible stretch, is to substitute 2 and then play 1. So we'd play 1, substitute 2, right? So, yes, to answer that question, Sir Woolsley, yes, finger substitution is essential for a lot of Brahms. And it's that combined with the fact that we have these octaves throughout the whole thing, plus the fact that we need to use the pedal sparingly, appropriately, right? So that we don't blur too much. We still have a clean melody, but also sustaining the harmony. Clean melody means a lot of times, sometimes we're changing on the 8th note in this piece. It's that many pedal changes, but we need to sustain things so perfectly so the hands need to stick in the keys. It's the combination of sticking down and the spread that usually causes hand injuries for people, or strain, or the beginning of carpal tunnel and things like that. Antonio, I'm glad you're finding this helpful, Antonio. So, Sir Woolsley, you say you use the pedal all the time, but you change it. I would mark in your score exactly where the pedal changes. And, for example, first bar, it's every left hand note, or every time these bells ring, and then there, it's every 8th note. Pedal, 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 pedal. And then one pedal, 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 pedal. So there's a lot of that. In order to make that sustain for us, we have to stick in the keys, right? So I don't see anything horrible, but I do, Sir Woolsley, I sometimes see some of the tendons, especially in your thumb, your right-hand thumb. Some of the tendons are sticking out. I don't know if you can kind of see that on my hand. Maybe I'll show you. So you can see on the top-down view, see how that tendon is like really strained if I hold it like that, whereas that's relaxed. So even if when I stretch and come back, right, that's one of the areas we really need to watch out for. As we stretch, this is going to get injured if we don't have some way of letting it relax. So you see, if I play an octave, let me play it up here. It's easier to see. So if I play an octave and I'm tense while I'm playing because I'm trying to control the inner fingers, this is sticking out. If I play and I'm not as tense because I'm not trying to control the inner fingers as much, it doesn't stick out. So it's still a little bit because I have to reach for an octave. We all do, right? There's a little bit, but it's not as pronounced as that. You see the difference in tension? It's probably kind of a minute thing, but it's a big difference in how it feels to play. And if we're having tension here and stretching and feeling that, then it's also going to cause, you could see like the little other tendons in the hand here. Those are also sticking out where they shouldn't be. So we do want to try to avoid that. Sir Woolsley, I am going to suggest to you, you probably have heard this on other streams, and this is helpful for everybody, but there is, I've got it handy. Huh. Okay, there is an exercise in this book, the Docniani Essential Finger Exercises. I just actually talked about this in one of my courses, the course on arabesque number 2. I can't remember which one. One of the courses I recently put out, I talk about the Docniani and exercise in here. You might be able to find this on IMSLP for free. It's exercise 16. This doesn't have anything to do with the stretches. It has to do with voicing chords. Chord voicing means bringing out one note. And throughout this piece, right, we have to bring out 5, 4, 3, and 2, and then sometimes 1. That's the real challenge of this piece. And the Docniani exercise 16 and 16A are perfect for, I wonder if I might be able to show you on the overhead. So, here we are. So you can, I guess, maybe take a screenshot of that. But these work on chord voicing. And you don't necessarily have to do exactly the notes that the exercise suggests. You can apply the principle to anything. And it's the principle we've talked about before of breaking the chord and then falling into the notes that we don't want to be emphasized. Because a wonderful performance of this piece, everything that's not the melody is going to be pushed way to the background as a background texture. The E flats are just distant bells ringing. Here it's very obvious where the melody is. And then it switches position. And the two voices are more equal. And then it goes back, right? So yes, Sir Woolsley, much more voicing than what you're doing. Exactly right. That's the biggest thing. I'd also say you might be able to slow it down a tad. It seemed a little bit rushed. Thanks, Sir Woolsley. It seemed a little bit rushed, and this is just a really introspective piece. And when we get to the B section, the second page, it gets even darker and deeper, and it's so lovely. Antonio asks, can this also work when playing difficult seventh chords in jazz? Absolutely. Yeah, if you want to bring out different parts of the chord, or if the melody exists within the chord, absolutely, same exercise. Bring out one note. Here, let me take a little bit of a... And the next step in Dagnani, after we bring out, I'll just use a simple triad. E flat, since we're in E flat. The next step is to be able to play the whole chord, but voice up each individual note. So we start with like that, but then we play lowest note voiced up, middle note voiced up, upper note voiced up. And you should be able to go back and forth once you've mastered this. So that was okay. You could hear I'm kind of climbing the arpeggio as I play and coming back down, but I'm still trying to articulate all 3 notes at a time. The more notes you add to that, Antonio, the more notes you add, if it's not just a triad, if you've got 4 pitches or 5 or something like that in the hand, the harder it is to choose, right? Great. So Sir Woolsley, I think those are my comments. You're doing a lovely job, and this is a huge leap in difficulty from things that you've worked on in the past. So kudos to you for doing that, for tackling it. It's going really, really nicely. I would just urge you to, while you're playing with finger legato, because it's so necessary in finger substitutions, every moment that you possibly can, find those moments where we can relax and move away from the octave spread. Even if it's 1 on a line or 2 on a whole line of music, those are going to be essential for keeping the hand relaxed. And if you're practicing this for a long time, let's say an hour plus, keeping from getting injured. Okay? I would be anxious, actually, Sir Woolsley, to hear you play the rest of it. So I hope you'll send it in when you finish the piece. Especially when this section comes back and repeats. I love the B section and I love the repeat of the A section. It's really great. Hey, Thomas. Awesome. Good to see you, Thomas. Thomas is a fellow professional pianist. Nice to see you here. Oh, let's see. Let's go back to Sir Woolsley. Drop in the chat if you've got any more questions for me. I think I covered everything that you asked about, but I'm happy to go over any more if you've got more questions. But fantastic work. Great progress. Keep relaxed. Keep trying to bring out those inner voices. All right. Skullbone, I've got to come back to your question. Skullbone, you said as a beginner, you find yourself trying to think about your left hand and the right hand fingering together and trying to read the music, and it ends up in total chaos. Any suggestions? Oh, gosh. So the typical things that you probably already do, but I'll say them just in case you don't. And Antonio, can you submit John Cage? Sure. We'll play it at the end of a stream sometime. If you don't know that joke, feel free to Google it, everybody else. So, Skullbone, first and foremost, practice hands separately, for sure. Do that. Spend time working on hands separately. Second suggestion. Take really small chunks of music at a time. Like, don't try to go through a line or a piece or a lot all in one pass through or one go through or one repetition. We want to take very, very small tidbits. And you can even, scales are usually the place where people have trouble with this the first time. So, Skullbone, are you practicing scales? 1, how are you practicing scales? 2, and while you type that in, I will just give you a couple tidbits about that until I hear what you're doing. So for example, scales, I usually always start people on scales going in contrary motion because it gets the hands working together, at least on most of the white key majors. It gets the hands working together, finger crosses at the same time, same fingers at the same time, but we're still training the hands to be playing at the same time, even though they're doing similar things, just mirrored, right? And then we will take things a step at a time. So for example, if we're having a lot of trouble lining up fingering in a scale between the left hand and the right hand, we'll just go to the first cross with the thumb. That's usually what's going to mess people up. And then the second cross will be in the left hand. With scales in particular, we can look for where fingers line up, what finger lines up with another finger, and so on and so on. Oh, thanks, Sir Woolsley, for the super. I appreciate it. When it comes to reading a score and doing all of this simultaneously, sight reading is a whole other skill. And there's a lot, gosh, so much we could talk about sight reading. First and foremost, if you're going to practice sight reading, pull out music that is significantly easier than what you are working on otherwise. So, if you said you're a beginner, and if you're working on stuff in a lesson book or in a method book or something like that, that's great. Depending on the method book, you might have chords, stuff like that, and a melody in one hand, and then it flips around, right? I would get there's Sir Woolsley just said it, Schaefer sight reading exercises. I would download that on IMSLP. Go through the first book of them. The first book is going to have very simple rhythms and very same hand positions for everything. So you're going to have like whole notes and half notes in the first exercise. You'll have some quarter notes that come in, maybe 5 exercises in. And there's not a lot of finger crossing we have to do. We just have to navigate what hand's doing what. And they start doing similar things, and then they slowly break apart. Because sight reading is a totally different skill than simply organizing the brain and the hands to do separate things at the same time, right? So I kind of covered 2 things there. And I haven't heard back from Skullbone. But if Skullbone is still here, let me know if that's helpful for you. If those are all things that you've already tried, let me know, and I can go into a bit more detail, and we can pull out some other things. But those are great first places to start. Bedlington Gruber says the entire name, it's C. Schaefer. Let me type it in. And it's simply called sight reading exercises. And I'm looking for it, and I cannot find it right now, but let's see. Here we go. Yep. Let me show you. I'll just pop up my copy on the screen here. So that's the cover page for book 1, and then the opening. And you can see here, if I just zoom in, they start nice and simple. Nice and simple. So no matter, almost no matter what level beginner you are, we're going to be able to tackle these kinds of things immediately. And they get far more complicated as you move on from here. I mean, we go into some of the other books. These get much more difficult. So there's a lot of room to progress. That's the end, yeah. So there's plenty to work on, and that was book 1. There are 3 books that are there are 4 books in total. There are 3 of them that I found for free on IMSLP. They should all be free. They're all in the public domain. And number 1 thing, though, take music that is significantly easier than what you're practicing otherwise. That's the key to learning how to be a better sight reader. It has to be digestible for us in such a quick manner. Great. Let me go back to a couple other questions here. So I'm just going to go through in the chat from the top down. I see Jose is here. Hey, Jose. And let's see, Sir Woolsley had said Bach is harder to read and memorize than Brahms. Yes, I'd agree with that. Bach, the harmony is always moving around. Notes are always moving around. Brahms tends to stay more stable and in one place, right? But Bach, funny you bring that up, because Bach is usually a direction that I would first give a student for learning finger substitution. We would definitely work on it in Bach because it doesn't require the spread. We're just working in small little bits. I also have another in-person student working on Granados' dedication particularly for finger substitution, and also for bringing out, it's not as hard as the Brahms. We still have to bring out a melody, though, while other textures are moving around. The melody happens to be on the top instead of in the middle. So those are 2 other places that I have usually started people with working on finger substitution, where we're really just working on one skill at a time instead of Brahms. And oh gosh, yeah, Sir Woolsley, that Brahms, you jumped like 6 years in difficulty in that piece, maybe more. So congratulations, it's going great. We have Aditya here. Aditya said, "What would you recommend, or what book would you recommend for an adult learner?" There are 2 series that most people use, and that's the Alfred Adult series, which is 3 books. I think it's 3 books, and then there's the Faber Adult Method books, which are 2 books long. I think both have merit, and in general, Alfred tends to be more chord focused. So especially if you want to eventually play more popular music and music theater and things like that, Alfred's great. If you want to play more classical music, I think the Faber book is going to get you there more quickly. Faber usually makes the hands be more independent much earlier in lessons than Alfred does. There's also a couple things in Alfred that the Book 1 of the Alfred Adult series, I think it's around page 50 of Book 1, talks about lifting the fingers, which, if you know me, that's a big no-no. And if you don't have a teacher or someone telling you don't follow the directions on page 50, and then subsequently Hannon is introduced 20 pages later, again in a very not healthy way, that can be something to really watch out for if you're self-taught. Great. We've got a lot of questions coming in. Awesome. I'm just continuing on through here. So Aditya, I would recommend usually Faber, or mix the 2 books together. If you want a little bit of chord work, use Alfred, and then we'll also have a couple pages in Faber that we go back and forth to, or we're studying at the same time. That doesn't hurt. And then at a certain point, usually after the first book or so, we can start looking at, we've gathered enough basic knowledge that we can start looking at other arrangements and things like that. All right. Dropping back down. Tiago said you have the Dachniani book. Great. We have, I'm just going to say it's OCD King. Any tips for finding a quality piano teacher without a lot of trial and error? This is great. Thanks for that question. Yes. First off, if you have an opportunity to interview the teacher or to have a conversation with the teacher, absolutely have one. That's really, really important. A good teacher should be able to go with you with the direction that you want to go with music, and they shouldn't be fitting you in the box of what they know how to do best, let's say. So, for example, I am a classical piano teacher, and I will definitely try to expose all of my students to that side of music because I have a passion for it, right? But I've been a studio musician. I've played pop piano. I'm an arranger and composer. I do a lot of other things. But when I talk to a student, a new potential student, let's say, I am always asking them, what do you want to learn? What is your goal? What's your end goal? Where would you like to be in 3 years playing? And if you say, I want to be playing Disney arrangements, like A Whole New World from Aladdin, we're going to work in a bit of a different direction than if somebody said, I want to be playing Chopin nocturnes in 3 years. Tiago says, work with Charles and problem solved. Well, thanks, Tiago. I appreciate that. So every teacher should be able to guide you in a specific direction. If we're working on playing pop music, there's going to be a lot of work. Jeffrey, hey, Jeffrey. There's going to be a lot of work on understanding harmony and theory. Not complicated stuff, but understanding chord structure. We're going to do a lot of that work away from method books. In fact, gosh, I can teach people how to play... Let It Be might be a little complicated. But Let It Be is all diatonic. Let's see. Okay, so if we were going to work on that, then we would be talking about chords and inversions. Lesson 1. We would not even dive into a method book. We would get plenty of note reading, just writing music out ourselves on staff paper. And we'd talk, all of the stuff covered in a method book we would talk about, but it would be in a very different context. So a good teacher is going to be able to go with you in all of those different directions. And yes, you hopefully will be able to find that out in a conversation with them or in emails with them before you take your first lesson. That is super important. And if they tell you something like, well, this is the way, that's a big red flag. Because every good teacher will know, even playing the classical repertoire, it isn't just one way. For example, when we talk about fingering choices, everybody's hand is a different size and a different shape. They have and let's say an innate ability to do certain things better than other things at the piano immediately, before any study. Or you'll find that they do some things more quickly and other things not as quickly. A really good teacher is not going to say this is the way. Speaking of Disney, right? They're not going to say that, and they're going to work with you on how best to convey music with your hand and your body and your previous life experience. Let me take that one step further. Music is always taking, maybe us as the pianists, always the listener on a journey. That's what the art is for. The art is for taking you on a journey from point A, the first note, to point B or C or D, the end of the piece. And through all of that, we've experienced emotion, and we've maybe ridden a roller coaster, or we've walked through the woods, or we've walked around a lake or a pond, okay? And I'm a very visual, I really like visuals when I interpret music, but the best thing that you can do, and this is again going toward individuality in lessons, is that a good teacher is going to be able to tell you, they're going to be able to give you direction and say, try thinking about this and try thinking about this. But they're going to encourage you to come up with your own story and your own set of emotions that go with it and things that you relate to the most. And so a best teacher is going to challenge you to find that within you, and then explore from there. And they're not going to stamp their interpretation or their how they like to do it upon you. The only time that's going to happen is if we're breaking a lot of rules of interpretation. So there are things to learn, but we also need to make it our own. And when we make music our own, that's when it speaks to us the most, and that's when it speaks to people that listen to it the most. So that's a great question. Awesome. Let's see here. I think going through here, the next question was from Antonio. Is it correct to play scales without thumb tucking, but simply moving the hand to the next note? I would avoid that, Antonio. So the thumb tuck is essential, and it's an essential part of playing a tremendous amount of the repertoire. So there's a real mixed opinion on how scales apply to repertoire. I think that they're super applicable because especially in Mozart, Haydn, especially early Beethoven, scales are a massive part. They might not exactly look like, sometimes they are a literal representation of the scale. Sometimes they're not. But the thumb tuck and the finger cross are really, really important for being able to navigate around the keyboard in a quick and efficient manner without having to do jumps. The time, I'm just going to throw this in there for more advanced players. We start to talk about playing things in maybe 5-finger positions, especially arpeggios and things like that. Going from 5 through 1 and then back to 5. There's a lot in Liszt, some in Chopin, that we need to incorporate that kind of technique. It's still almost never a part of a running passage. It's it would be very rare for that to be a part of a running passage. So Antonio, that's really important. Learn the thumb tuck and the finger cross. And you'll be able to play a lot of stuff much more quickly. You'll be able to learn things a lot more quickly because as soon as you start to play a passage, I know I'm using C, but gosh, there's even, I'll pull it up. I think we talked about this last time. Here we are. Some Mozart. If we look at the second line, or starting with the last bar of the first line. Those are basically scales. They don't exactly feel like C major. They're all a part of C major, right? But it's absolutely necessary if we're going to play 16ths and play it allegro. We got to be able to thumb cross in something like that. And that's a great example of nearly a literal scale, at least with how it feels. Crossing between 3 and 4. Right? As Sir Woolsley says, haters not here, so you can use C as much as you want. That's true. Okay, awesome. Antonio, I know that's maybe, not the quickest answer to get you from point A to point B, but I hope that's helpful for you. Marie says, what's the best beginner warm-up? And same question for repertoire. Marie, that really depends on you. So, there are I'll give you a couple warm-ups. First of all, never play scales in only 5 fingers. Books always teach you 5-finger pattern. Skip that. We don't need to spend any time playing a 5-finger pattern. We're going to know 5-finger patterns from practicing our cadences. There's a cadence pattern. Let me show you that, and you can come back and watch this, Marie. So, cadence pattern, we're going to start with, this is just C, triad. This is the 4-chord triad. It's an F chord, C, F, A. Back to the 1 chord, C major, and then our 5-7 chord, B, F, and G. So, C major, F major, C major again, so our G7. Okay, so as long as we practice after we finish the scale, that was just 1 octave, and then play our cadence pattern, we're going to get benefits of 2 things. We're going to get a nice scale warm-up that uses all of our fingers, plus we're going to see chord shapes and stick in this 5-finger position that a lot of method books introduce music with, right? The thing that we don't want to get stuck doing is only being able to play 5 and then being able to play 5 somewhere else and never really learning that we can go all over the keyboard, up and down. It's actually a very similar answer to what I told Antonio, just by navigating our thumb tucks and our hand crosses. So I actually always start day 1, someone who's never touched the piano before, we always start with 2 octave scales. Always. And usually not in C. But 2 octaves. Go nice and slow. We get the notes right. I like to start in B major. It fits the hand really nicely. And then we could add some other keys from there. So, scales. Second thing I'll say, I know a lot of people, I did a video on this, but I know a lot of people haven't seen it. A warm-up that's great for beginners and also great for people that have tension as you play. Or if you experience kind of getting stuck or tensing up, even partway through a piece. Let me demo this for you. So again, we're in C. So C and G. I'll do this once with this angle, and then I'll show you again from the top down. So playing the 5th, C and G, it's just the shape the hand falls into, right? And then we're going to play the middle 3 fingers and have them push the hand off the key. So we drop in, right? The wrist is cushioned, and then we push off. Drop in, push off. And we can walk up the C major scale, just playing white keys. For people that know the Hannon Faber book, which we've talked about on the channel a lot. This is almost like a beginner's version. Hannon Faber is given to more like late beginner, early intermediate students. This is like a super beginner version of that because we're getting the wrist in motion and not stuck. So down and lift, or drop and release, drop and release. And we can do both hands together, right? Let me show you that from the top-down view. All right, so same thing. Here we go. Now, ironically, I think that's a great beginner thing, and I haven't had to give it to an advanced student yet, but I have seen students working in a degree program that have to go back to this simple exercise to get the wrist loose again because it's gotten so locked up over years of not working with a great teacher. So those would be a couple of my suggestions for absolute beginners. Skip the 5-finger pattern, skip 1 octave scale, go straight to 2 octaves, and then throw this in there to make sure that our wrist is staying nice and loose and we don't have to worry about reading notes off a page or anything else like that. Repertoire. Marie asked also about repertoire. I would stick with what's given in a method book and the supplementary books for it. So like Faber, I think Alfred does too, but Faber gives, they offer arrangements of songs that you might know and you might like, both classical ones and more contemporary ones, that are specifically arranged to match the level that you're already working on in a method book. So you can buy Faber Book 1, Method Book 1, and you can get matching a whole book of repertoire, maybe 20 or 30 pieces that matches exactly the kind of stuff that you're working on in the method book. I would really, really do that. Oh, we've got so many great questions. I love this. Tiago said, I told Charles that Bach is a hard sell for me because you dislike Baroque. But Charles is so nice that I'm still alive. Hey, I'll go out on a limb here and say I don't love Baroque either. I think it has a tremendous amount we can learn from, but it's not the music that I would pull out to enjoy my time on the bench either. Absolutely, Marie, you're welcome. Yeah. So I think it's super valuable, and there are things in there that are fantastic and essential to learn about navigating the keyboard. But I completely understand where you're coming from because I don't sit down and choose to play Bach for fun. Everybody's different. I know some people that absolutely love it and they go there all day long. I would rather play Chopin and Liszt and Rachmaninoff, personally. Sir Woolsley said, my teacher is always making me have an active Bach. Good teacher, Sir Woolsley. Sounds like you've got a good teacher. Okay, Skullbone, I'm glad you are still here. So you're learning C, F, G, A minor scales over 1 octave. Great. Awesome. Oh, I hope to see you again, Skullbone, and definitely bring those questions back in. And in fact, send in a video and we can talk further about all that stuff. Bachwards Fellow. Hey, Bachwards Fellow. You use Let It Be as well and Hallelujah. Oh, yeah. Hallelujah. That's a 4-chord song, right? If we add... Great. Oh, Jose. So, Jose, you said you watched the whole Burgmüller arabesque lesson, very detailed. Awesome. Thanks, Jose. I really appreciate that, and I'm glad that you enjoyed watching it. I hope you got something out of it. I know, Jose, you're on the advanced side of things. So, and Burgmüller is usually not something that advanced players play. But if you've read the descriptions, you know I think they're absolutely amazing studies to revisit as we learn more and more stuff. Kramer studies, and you can't stand Czerny. Yes, a Czerny. No, none. There might be a couple Czernys that are okay, but they're not. None of them are really great. They're just really repetitive, and they don't leave. There are much more musical ways to learn technique. Kramer studies, I'm not familiar with. I'm gonna have to go look those up. So thanks for mentioning that, Jose. And Bachward's fellow quotes Bach, who said, "Playing is easy. You just push the right keys down at the right time, and it plays itself." Right? There is something to be said for that, and there is something also to be said for, we talk about prodigies that are really young and that can play this incredible stuff. They don't have to learn the coordination. They don't have to have a lot of muscle mass. They just play the right key at the right time. And sometimes I actually think that the older we get, the more we get in our own way of learning whatever it is new, but especially the piano and music in general is combining so many aspects of learning. There's a visual aspect, there's a physical aspect, there's a mental aspect. It's very complex, and it's difficult to get out of our own way. Bachward's fellow followed that up with, for the scale's thumb tuck, is it also important to lead with the wrist in the direction heading, up or down? So, Bachward's fellow, there is a point where that's important, yes, but I don't always start with that, because there's so much else to learn in the meantime. But yes, I don't like to necessarily lead laterally with the wrist. There is a little bit just as the thumb moves. If we let the wrist be fluid, right? If we let the wrist be fluid, then it is going to move laterally a little bit. We're not stuck here and then trying to tuck the thumb under. That causes a lot of tension if the wrist doesn't move. Right? And the secondary bit of that is if we, as a more advanced player, if you tilt your wrist toward the direction you want to go, that adds speed. But usually that's many, I don't talk about that in lessons until many years down the road. Bachward's fellow, you also said, for cadences, do you also use the plain 5 triad as well as the 5/7? Not as often, but that can be just as valuable. So in that case, 5 would be that instead of that one. Yeah. And, Bedlington Groomer, and I'm slowly getting to the bottom of the chat here. Thanks so much, everybody, for all the great questions. Bedlington Groomer said, could you mention why you like Hannon Faber better than the original Hannon book? And let's see. Sir Woolsley said, Hannon Faber introduces the Taubman approach to Hannon. Hannon itself uses all the wrong concepts. Yes. Okay. Sir Woolsley, I'm glad you know that. Great summed up answer. Yes. So Hannon, the original Hannon exercises, many of the publications, page 1 of many of the publications say, lift the fingers high and play with accuracy. And if you don't have a teacher, you're going to do this. It's thumb, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or exercise 1. There's a lot of up, down, up, down, up, down. We have, now that over the last 150 years, and it wasn't that far in the future that we learned this, but the fingers are coordinated with tendons, right? The tendons go from the tip of the finger up and over across the top of the hand, and then they go all the way up the forearm and connect up here at the elbow. Anytime that we are using a tendon, right? The tendon is being triggered from up here to pull a finger up like that. We are asking the hand to move in the opposite direction. This sounds like a simple thing, and it is. We're asking the hand to move in the opposite direction of where it needs to go, which is down and into the key. So if we happen to follow the directions that are printed in the English version of the original Hannon book, we're going to actually be slowing our technique down, which is ironic because Hannon's called, the virtuoso pianist. And it's highly unlikely that if you follow the directions in the book, you are going to develop virtuosic technique. You will be causing your body to fight itself. Why is Hannon so popular? There's probably a little bit of business and marketing that happened way back in the late 19th century. Secondly, pianos and organs. Hannon was an organist. He was not a pianist. Organs, pipe organs in particular, the most weight that you feel in the key. They don't have weight, but the resistance you feel in the key happens right at the top of the key. And once you pass that point of resistance, the key really just drops to the bottom with no effort at all. It takes very little effort to play a pipe organ. It takes even less effort to play an electronic organ. The keys really just fall down. On a pipe organ, especially one where the manuals are connected to the actual pipes, the resistance you feel is the airflow of the pipe itself. It's actually physical. And then in order to open the pipe up so that sound can come out, so the air passes through, we have to get past that air pressure. That's the resistance we feel in the key. That's why it's at the top of the key. On a piano, the resistance is the whole way down. Secondly, on a piano, the resistance is far, far heavier. We're talking about, on a modern piano, especially at the low notes, like 100 grams of weight just to get the key to go down and play piano. And then if we're going to play with more, that's even more weight. A lot more weight. Oh, Sir Woolsley. Is it really a 100% wrong approach? I would say it is a 90% wrong approach, which is why I steer everybody away from Hannon. So Sir Woolsley just said, your current teacher insists that you play Hannon and scales and use the lifting the finger approach. So the lifting the finger approach is from the finger school of playing the piano, which was around for Bach and perhaps Mozart and Haydn. Mozart, all of these composers, Bach didn't have a piano. Mozart and Haydn had something that only slightly bears the resemblance of the modern piano. So the amount of energy it takes to get the key to go down was very, very, very minimal. And yes, you'll still see harpsichordists and people that are play early pianofortes. They use a finger approach to playing, and it's not detrimental to them because the energy, the force that they have to put through the keyboard is nowhere near as much as we have to on a modern piano. So if you're playing a period instrument, it's fine. And it may even make playing some of that repertoire easier because that's how it was written. The composers played it that way. The trouble is translating that to the modern piano. Most of us, even professionals, we don't play on period instruments all that often. So the only thing that I will say, and it's not a lifting finger thing. It's almost not a lifting the finger thing. The only thing I would say that lends credence toward a slight variation of the Hannon approach in the book is that we can generate a little bit extra attack with a little preparatory motion. So you see my second finger here? If I do it in slow motion, there is a little bit of an up and then a down, right? And if I'm really trying to articulate something incredibly, maybe brightly or pronounced, there might be a little bit of a preparation, but it's not ever without also using the wrist to aid that and without fluidity in the wrist and the arm and the upper arm. It's never, especially never like that. It's not going to help you with accuracy. My approach to helping with accuracy is the opposite. There is no upward movement. Hand is on the keyboard. It just goes straight down. No lift. Then we can put two notes together. Straight down. As soon as we incorporate the lift, I've even heard Kaplinski from Juilliard talk about this. We're using the body in opposite directions. The lift is fighting what the other fingers are doing. And as soon as we're trying to put this in a faster context, and we're lifting fingers, 3, and especially 4 and 5 share a tendon up here. They're on one tendon. You try to lift one, and it's going to lift the other one. And for most people, you try to lift 3 or you try to lift 4, it's also going to lift 3. So now, try playing 4, 3 and 4 in combination where they have to go from one to the next one. If one is lifting and one is depressing at the same time, we're asking one tendon to move basically the hand in opposite directions simultaneously. So it's physically impossible on 4 and 5 for 99% of the world. And it's not great for articulating 3, 4, and 5. 2 and 1 they're more independent. The tendons, we have a lot more control over them naturally. It's still not good. There's a lot of excess motion there. Add to this, going on into the future, virtuosic technique is about efficiency of motion. It is not about added motion. So efficiency means the least motion possible to get the result we're looking for. If we need to play incredibly fast scale work or arpeggios, we cannot have the fingers flying up and down and up and down and up and down. They're going to be going all in the opposite direction of what we need. You can tell I'm very passionate about that. So Hannon Faber talks about what Randall Faber added is talking about having spark and energy in the fingers, which is good, and it's necessary, and we need it, but we don't accomplish it by lifting. Here's something else really interesting I learned about Hannon. It is only the English translation of the original Hannon book that says to lift the fingers. The French, which Hannon was French. The original French does not talk about lifting the fingers at all. Whoever translated it into English added that. It talks about playing with precision. It talks about articulating with clarity. That's what the original says. It doesn't talk about lifting. So, you could use that to argue for still playing Hannon today, but I still wouldn't do it. It's just, it doesn't activate our brain musically, really. And they tend to cause a massive amount of tension and burning in the forearm for everybody, unless your technique is already fantastic. In which case, if your technique's already fantastic, there's no point in playing Hannon. What a Bachward's fellow just summed up what I said perfectly. The problem with lifting is that the extensors, the lift, cannot shut off quickly enough to let the flexors play down. Exactly that. Yes, you followed up and said there's a slight moment when both the flexors and extensors are engaged, creating tension and injury. Yes, absolutely. I have heard that Sergei Babayan, very famous concert pianist and teacher, he advocates for a little bit of preparatory motion. Even in fast passage work, there can be little bits of preparatory motion, but they don't involve a large finger lift. So there's a big shift in thinking between preparing the hand to do something and lifting, right? Jose, great. Dual muscular pulls is what Taubman would say. So, Sir Woolsley, I know I wouldn't argue with your teacher. Teachers never like that. But I would really resist. I would really resist that. Send your teacher over to my video to watch. Because it's I and a couple of friends that I know who are active online, we're very passionate about eliminating Hannon from the practice repertoire for pianists, or at least paring it way down so it is not the thing that people start with, and it's not the thing they spend an hour a day on going through the whole book. I know a Bachward's fellow is a big fan of using Hannon to teach other patterns and to teach harmony and stuff. That's great, but in its own way. But so Sir Woolsey, you said I do it in front of him, but you don't activate him. Well, good. I will commend you for that and keep encouraging you to do that. I can't believe a couple minutes ago I said that you have a good teacher. I don't know if I still agree. I'd like to keep hearing about what you study in lessons, though, Sir Woolsley. Let's see, Antonio from a while back before we got on the big Hannon tirade. Antonio asked a clarification about hand arch. Is it correct that the knuckles should be the keystone between the fingers and the elbow? Yes. I have 2 points on that, Antonio. Yes, a good arch is the keystone, a cornerstone of technique. It's very important. We have a lot of stability. We don't want to lose energy we put into the piano through a broken structure, right? So we don't want the wrist to be broken. So, beginners can sometimes play, if they don't have a movable bench especially, beginners can play with the hand way down here. Or if they sit too high, the hand is up. Those are also broken structures. If the arch is collapsed like this, that's a broken structure. If the end joints, the last knuckle of the fingers, if those collapse, that's a broken structure. So we want to eliminate all points where the structure breaks. The arch is one of those primary places. Good arch is really important. What's secondarily important is that we don't create the arch by gripping something or by using the fingers and pulling them into an arch shape. If we pull the hand into an arch shape, we're engaging the flexors, which we just talked about. And if we're maintaining those, if we're keeping those engaged, we cannot start motion as efficiently. We need to always be starting motion from a neutral point, or where there's structure in the right place and looseness everywhere else. So what I always suggest doing, I know some of you have seen this before, when you're on the piano bench, or if you stand up, shake your hand out, bring it up. This is your natural arch shape. That's it. If we put it on the keyboard, you might find that it is far more spread than how a lot of books tell you. A lot of books say to play like this and on the fingertips. That is only okay if that's your natural hand shape when you let the hand relax. If it falls into that shape or more like that after you relax, then that's okay. That's good for you. If it doesn't, if your hand naturally plays like this is the correct arch shape. It's not as curved. Alfred, I think, some of the Alfred books, they talk about holding onto a bubble or holding onto a ball or something like that. I think it's bad advice, because hold means grip. Grip means this. You're using the flexors. We put it on the piano. The hand is already now engaged when it's not even doing anything. And now we have to try to play through it. So, yes, the arch is really important. Yes, sometimes if we play on the more curved side than what might be most natural for us, if we play on the more curved side, we have less of a chance, as we learn about structure in the hand, as we learn to play, we have more of a chance that it'll stay nice and firm and not break. The further out and extended the fingers get, the more likely it is that the arch is going to break. I also call it the bridge. So if you ever hear me talking about the bridge in pieces, in videos or things like that, same spot in the hand. Let's see. There's a lot of Hannon comments from back when we were talking about that stuff. Oh, yes. Jose said, none of my teachers ever taught raising fingers. Good. Marie said, what do you prefer between iPad and sheets of music paper? I have been on reading music off an iPad for, 4 years now. Almost exclusively for 4 years. Sometimes I'll go back and pull out music that my teachers wrote in. So that is one benefit. If you've got a really great teacher, and especially if you're working on staples of the repertoire, if you have paper copies, especially nice books, and you have notes from all of your lessons, that can be super valuable. So I really enjoy pieces that I've studied in the past. I enjoy going back through the paper copies I have of them and looking at all of the markings. Some of them are even dated, about when we were working on specific things. That's really fantastic to have that. And it's easily lost if you're only working on a digital copy. That said, it's a lot easier to, bring all of the music that you're working on a single tablet rather than in books and books and books of stuff. So I think there's value in both. If you're really, really serious about music study, more than just have a passion for it, more than just want to do it for fun, but let's say this is something that you'd like to, maybe you want to play publicly someday, or you want to perform, or you're working toward being that kind of pianist, I would get paper copies, get a really nice score, spend the money on the texts, and take those to lessons and work off of those. But until that point, I think iPad's just fine. And these days, everything that I do is off iPad, except rarely, once in a while. So Scott said you enjoy Hannon in practice and you ignore raising the fingers comment. Good. Because that's not the essence of Hannon anyway. Let's see. I went over what Bachman's fellow said and Jose. Jose, thanks for clarifying this. Edna, referring to Edna Golansky, would say fingers play down and the necessary amount of up will take care of itself. So never, ever think about the up motion. It's always thinking about down and in. Absolutely agree with that. So Woolsley says, it's the only red flag with your teacher you found. Well, that's good. Tiago said, Bach, Prelude in C minor by April and a year from now. I don't think you're crazy. I think that's great. So Tiago, you should know. Based on what I said earlier, I don't have any Bach on my iPad. In fact, some of you are going to get a kick out of this. I lost my Bach scores for something like 3 years. I found them a few months ago in a box that had not been unpacked from moving a couple times into a couple different homes. That is how often I pull Bach out. So I cannot play it for you. Sorry, Tiago. Maybe next time. So Bedlington Groomer says, on a digital copy, couldn't you have notes from a great teacher kept on a separate page so you can keep it? Yes, absolutely. I mean, maybe it's me getting older, but I have this fear that the stuff that's stored in the cloud or stored on a device that I'm going to lose it all. So I don't keep anything that's like super valuable. I'll keep copies of things, but then maybe I'll keep a digital copy of a copy. I'll keep those in like 2 or 3 places in case one thing goes down. Speaking of that, a great friend of mine who's does a huge amount of stuff in musical theater, he had a massive library catalog of musical theater repertoire, not just the piano reductions of stuff, but like the entire scores, conductor scores, and all kinds of stuff on his iPad. His iPad crashed. It hadn't been backed up in like a year. He lost a huge amount of his library, and he had scanned stuff in at a library in New York City. He had no way of getting back there to get copies of all of it again unless he bought scores, which would have been like thousands of dollars at least, all because technology failed and he didn't know about it. So that's part of the reason why if you're going to keep a digital copy with notes, great. I would keep a couple copies of it. I'd download it off my device, put it in Google Drive, and then I'd put it on a computer, and then I've got it in 3 places. If it's really, really important to you, I would do that. Let's see. Buckward's Fellow said, I have for years made a copy of pieces I'm working on that you can mark up, and then you still have the original. I think that's a good idea. And then, if you're working on a Beethoven sonata, like you said, you only have to carry around a 1 piece instead of 300 pages. The only time I didn't like carrying my nice scores around to my lessons was a couple teachers that I had at festivals who marked it up in pen. I didn't love that. And I would never, ever, ever, ever say anything to them about it because they can do absolutely whatever they want to my scores. But yeah, I was just kind of cringed inside when it happened. Let's see. OCD King is back. So ask a potential teacher about their stance on Hannon. I think that's a good call. Yeah. I think going back to that point, you'll find that there is starting to become a very strong divide among teachers. There are teachers of the old school of playing that aren't familiar with the Taubman approach or Alexander technique. And they're just teaching the way they were taught and the way their teachers were taught. And even though there have been a lot of advancements, in teaching and the understanding of body mechanics and neuroscience, they're still teaching the old ways. But a lot of other teachers are teaching much different techniques. So yes. Sorry, I have a tickle in my throat. Bachwart's fellow said it's not backed up unless it's backed up on 3 different devices. Yeah, stored in separate physical locations. I love that. Sir Woolsley said, "Have you ever used a heavy blanket on an upright?" Sorry. I have not used a heavy blanket on an upright, Sir Woolsley. Insonorizing or desonorizing the piano, you say. I actually really dislike when pianos are covered up. I dislike when my grand piano, when the lid is down. So I always have the lid up, full stick on my grand. Never half stick. Even if I'm accompanying people, I almost always, I can play softly enough that in collaborative work, lit up is better. But yeah, I don't like that muffled sound. I like things to speak and to articulate, and then I feel like my ear is that much closer to what's going on inside the piano, and I can really listen to intricacies that I wouldn't be able to hear if it was covered up otherwise. And on an upright, gosh, I'd feel like on an upright the lid is already closed because usually it's up against a wall. Your soundboard is resonating into the wall and not out into the room, into the space. So you're already hearing a dampened sound. Then if you open the top, or if you were able to sit on the other side of where you're playing and hear the sound, if you like it, go for it. And I guess one thing I would say is if it's an extraordinarily bright piano, yeah, I'd put a blanket on it. That would make it much easier to tolerate playing. So most smaller Yamahas that I've played, not the really nice CFX Grands or C7s or things like that. If it's a smaller Yamaha, I would put a blanket on it probably, unless it's a very new piano. Tiago says, you're thinking of going Yamaha U1 next year. U1 is a great piano. Nice big upright. I'd really encourage you to look at the Kawai pianos that are competitors to the U1. Yamaha U1s tend to be, the ones that are older tend to be very, very bright. And you just touch a key and the whole instrument lights up. And you kind of lose the ability to play delicately. So something like a Kawai K300 or K500, those are going to be really, really great choices. The action feels really, really nice. The K500 is probably a similar size as the U1. Let's see, Edna said, when she was at Juilliard, injuries were rampant. Lots of ice packs. That shouldn't be happening. Yeah, that shouldn't be happening at one of the most prestigious music schools in the world. Shouldn't be happening. And that's just because a lot of old methodology was being used to teach on an instrument that wasn't developed for. Let's see. OCD King, you said you're new to piano and you see lots of conversation about exams. Is that viewed as a necessary path? Not necessarily, no. I think whether you take the exam or not, that's something that you can decide for yourself. If you want the experience of preparing like that and maybe even going somewhere and playing in front of people, that's a great experience in itself. And if you're interested in that, then go take the exams. And if you're not interested in that, then don't. Most of my in-person students are not interested in that kind of stuff. And so we stick on, some of them don't know this, but we stick on kind of an exam standard with what we're working on, and we deviate here and there depending on what they need. But I keep track of their progress using those standards that have been applied in our lessons, but they don't go and play any of it for anybody except me. And something that I also encourage my in-person students to do that I'll mention here is when you finish a piece of music, this is one thing that's great about the video submissions here on the channel. When you finish a piece of music, make a recording of it, even if it's just for yourself. If you want to post it online or post it somewhere or send it to family and friends, great too. But make a recording and keep it. And it's that moment in time captured, and it's your progress captured. And it might be a little stressful, depending on your personality. It might be a little stressful to prepare for that and to make the recording. But when it's done, you have this wonderful, not just a memory, but it's a wonderful recording that you can go back and revisit in years from now. When, if you've continued to study, you're going to be such a different player. When you can look back and you can say, oh, like, look at all those things that I've learned since then. Not in a bad way, but like, look at all the progress I've made over this amount of time. I think that's a really great thing. And again, those recordings, like Bachward's fellow said, to store those on 3 different devices in 3 different locations so that we don't lose them, right? Sir Woolsley said, before it sounded like too much down pedal. Sir Woolsley, that sounds like you were talking about your piano and why you put a blanket over it. If it sounds like the pedal's down, that's a problem with the dampers. So that's a regulation thing. So when your technician comes back out to look at the piano, I would have them take a look at that. If the dampers are not regulated right, if some of them aren't against the strings, that can be what's causing the resonance to sing out. The piano should be silent when... I get this isn't an acoustic, but it should. This has reverb on it too. But as soon as you let that go, we shouldn't hear any excess vibration or sympathetic resonance. There might be the tiniest bit in the upper octave where there aren't any dampers, but those strings don't have a lot of energy in them. So if you're hearing a lot of things ringing out, be sure to ask about the dampers and having those regulated. Bachward's fellow blanket said, blanket over a U1 helps. Yes. Antonio, you say, any suggestion for a beginner still trying to find a good sound on an electronic piano? That really depends, Antonio, on the keyboard you're playing on. Some of the more entry-level electronic keyboards, they're very hard to play softly, and the soft and the slow depression of the key, a slow attack, is what's going to give us a more rounded sound. You can do a little bit to help that by picking a mellower sounding patch, but honestly, I wouldn't worry about it too much, because if we try to fight an action that isn't maybe the best designed thing, just because that's what we have right now, if we try to fight that, we're going to be introducing tension in our technique, and we're going to be, I call it like walking on eggshells. I've played some grands that are so fast and light and bright pianos at the same time that I feel like I just have to hover above everything as I play a concert if I'm playing something delicately, or if I'm working in a collaborative nature with someone, and that's super uncomfortable. And if I had to do that every day, my hands would be in horrible shape. So Antonio, that's not a great answer. Look for a mellower patch, or 2. If it's being less of an aggressive sound, It's going to be more important to stay relaxed at the piano and play in a comfortable dynamic than really worry about pulling back. Again, that's keyboard dependent. The nicer the keyboard gets, the more it feels like an acoustic. And Bachwards Fellow says it's useful to tweak volume and touch settings. That can be helpful. It won't change how it feels to play, but at least the input you get. You can look for like a response curve, a dynamic response. And usually those are like hard, soft, medium, etc. You said on a P125, the light touch is almost unusable. Yeah, I would agree. Most classical pianists, the way we're trained, because we're getting so much out of the instrument and we're using energy so efficiently, we're usually playing more on... Keyboards are all MIDI, right? MIDI has 127 gradations of velocity. So most of the time, a piano dynamic, pianissimo, is going to be around 40. It's going to be a 40 velocity out of 127. That's already considerably up the scale. Things below 40 are like almost whisper quiet. Like you would never play something that softly ever. And so we're doing a lot of playing up higher in the dynamic range of the keyboard. So if you can find a velocity response on your keyboard that lends itself to being, if it'll feel harder to play, which will make the softs be a little bit more controlled, right? And we'll have to put a little bit more energy in to get the fortes out and fortissimos out. That's going to replicate more of what it feels like to play on most 9-footers than the reverse. Unless the piano's in bad regulation, they shouldn't be speaking like super brightly instantly with very little effort. So yeah, Bachwards Fellow says it changes a bit of the perception, but what it doesn't change is the feel of how the key goes down. So it's a good workaround. So thanks for bringing that up. Going back. Let's see. Bedlington Groomer said, for a digital piano, would you suggest getting external speakers? Again, that depends on the digital. If it's a nice digital, probably not. You probably don't need to spend all that money on speakers. If it's if you're playing on a P125, maybe you'd want to get some speakers because the speakers in there aren't very good. That depends on if you're going to upgrade to something in the future, because for the cost of getting speakers that are going to recreate a nice tone, you're probably going to be spending the same amount of money as you'd spend getting a better keyboard to begin with. So most of the time I'd say no. In my particular case, I'm using a stage piano. So my sound is coming out of the speakers behind me. There are no speakers in the keyboard at all. I can't get any sound unless I plug headphones in or plug it into another system. So I love it because I get to use the nice speakers I already have, and I don't need onboard speakers for my case in particular. So if you've got a use like that, stage pianos are great because you get a lot more bang for your buck because you don't have to have the added speakers in the system itself. But yeah, great question. Sir Woolsley's talking with Tiago. You need a European piano if you like mellow sound. Definitely European brand over most of the Japanese brands. That'll be helpful toward getting a mellower sound. Most of the time. But there are a lot of... I think I generally characterize European instruments as being very pure sounding. They're, very, very... If you think about the tone of a Bösendorfer, it's not necessarily complex, but it's very crystal and very pure and really lovely. If we contrast that with the character of a New York Steinway, the tone is not pure. It's got a lot of character. It's got a lot of maybe even inconsistencies, but that's what makes the piano have such a character and be its own individual. So that's kind of what the New York Steinway is all about. Technicians work to get rid of inconsistencies on them, but still, they have far more character and are more mellow than a European counterpart. Steinway also has a factory in Hamburg. The Hamburg Steinway sounds very different than the New York Steinway. So that kind of goes along with European versus American piano makers and so on. Oh, let's see here. We're probably going to call it a day pretty quickly. Scott said, your dampers need adjusting. Yeah, definitely. That makes a big, big difference. Nick had a question here. So let's call this one the last one, I think, okay? Nick's question was, what do you think about baby grand pianos? Are they worth the price? Or is it better to have a good upright? If you have the space and you can afford a grand piano, go for a grand piano. The action is going to be better. But a grand piano is a grand piano where it becomes a better choice. I usually say it has to be at least about 6 feet. The instruments that are smaller than that, we're compromising a lot in tone, and the pivot length of the action is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And so we're getting less of a benefit of it being a grand piano. The pivot length is one of the things that makes a 9-footer or a 10-foot concert grand so great. The amount of control you have is amazing because the key is actually from the key front. It's not just as long as what you see. It goes from here way in deep into the instrument. The longer the grand piano is, the further it goes inside and the further away the pivot point is. So just like a lever, when the longer the lever is, the more control you have over very, very subtle changes in energy. The shorter it is, even if you have really great technique, the shorter the grand piano is, the more it's going to show you all of your inconsistencies. The longer the piano is, the more those are going to be evened out. So I say until you can get to a 6-foot piano or so, either financially or the space. For most people, it's a little bit of both of those reasons. I would stick with an upright piano. Get a good upright. Even something that's like 45 inches is going to be great for a long, long time. And the taller you can go, uprights are usually measured vertically in inches or centimeters. The taller you can go, the better that's going to be. It doesn't always change a lot of the action, but you get a whole lot more soundboard to work with. And on tall uprights, like the U1 we're talking about, your soundboard dimensions end up being just as much as your soundboard dimensions on a grand piano. Sometimes more so. If you've got a tiny grand piano, like a 5-footer or something less, a large upright's going to have more soundboard. You're going to have longer strings. The only downside is your action's not going to have double escapement. So you're not going to be able to do repetitions without letting the key come all the way back up to the top. And the soft pedal is going to work a little differently too. Those are two relatively minute things to compromise in exchange for, one, costing a lot less, and two, being able to fit in most rooms that people have if you're talking about an upright. So those are my 2 cents on that. Let's see, I just saw Renner Actions from Sir Woolsley. Let me see what we were responding to here. Oh, thanks, Bedlington Groomer. Thanks for being here. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Skullbone and Jess. Awesome. Good to see you, Jess. Yeah, Sir Woolsey, you're talking about Renner Actions. That's interesting that you bring that up. So I'll give you a quick update on my piano, and then we'll call it a day. So I'm putting Renner hammers on my piano, Renner Blue Point hammers. And those are hammers that are used in European pianos, used in Hamburg Steinway and Fazioli and Bosendorfer. So I'm hoping it's going to be more of a rounded and pure sound because of that hammer choice. And I'm super, super excited that I'm putting on carbon fiber hammer shanks. That's the bit where the hammer connects to that throws it into the string. Hammer shanks and flanges. They're going to be carbon fiber from my friends over at WNG. They are part of the Mason and Hamlin Piano Company. And I'm super, super excited about what that's going to feel like. It should be that much more precise and consistent than the piano used to be. So the new strings are all on the instrument. I'm going to put out some videos about this, I think, maybe 2. And hopefully we get the new hammers in about a week, and they'll be installed, and then we start all the voicing work. Yes, Sir Woolsley, the Chopin Ballade. I know. I've had to practice. I'm actually out of town this weekend for a performance, and I've been practicing for that. And I just had to record a new arrangement for my other channel last week. So I've been, not for last week, it was yesterday. So I've been practicing for that as well. So Chopin has gotten put aside for a little bit until those things are done, but I'll get back to it soon. Definitely one of the first priorities when the piano is all set and ready is going to be actually recording some Chopin nocturnes. So we'll probably start there. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for joining in today. Lots of new people. I hope you check out the channel if you haven't checked it out already. And be sure and give this video a thumbs up if you haven't. That would be great. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Many of you are already. But yeah, I hope the new friends that we met today, I hope you'll come back and visit. We do these live streams about every 2 weeks, the second and fourth Wednesday of the month. And yeah, always great to see everybody that's a regular. Tiago, Bachward's Fellow, Bedlington, Sir Woolsley, Jose. Absolutely. It's always great to see all of you. And I always appreciate, especially, I know Bachward's Fellow is a teacher professionally, and I always appreciate hearing the other perspectives that everybody has to offer as well. So, great. Let's see. I think I'll see you in about 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks is the next stream. Second Wednesday of May. I can't believe it's May already. In any case, thanks for joining me today. Practice smarter, not harder. And I'll see you next time you visit Pianist Academy. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.